We work hard as physicians to take care of the health and well-being of our patients. But when it comes to our money, do we have the same condition of care? Probably not. Let's change that together. Welcome to the Financial Freedom for Physicians podcast, where we'll fight and advocate for your financial literacy. As always, I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. Thanks for being here. Let's jump into the show. This week's episode is sponsored by CityVest. CityVest has quickly become the most popular and best way for doctors to invest in top-performing real estate private equity funds that are usually reserved for institutional investors. This unique access to investing in these institutional funds is available for the first time ever through CityVest's easy and secure online investment platform. CityVest does the hard work of conducting due diligence and vetting the investments. They even get a third-party due diligence report that is posted on their website. As a result of aggregating a several $million investment amount into their access funds, CityVest gains access to investing in the institutional investment and is able to negotiate better investment terms such as a 12% preferred return. You can check them out at cityvest.com or go to the link in the show notes below. I bring on entrepreneurs, investors, business owners who are doing things on the cutting edge and doing things outside the box. And so hopefully you can learn from both sides. So today we have Michael Harris, and he's going to talk to us all about igniting the power of stories to change the world. So Michael, welcome.
It's really great to be here, Chris. I really like the idea of your financial location, your time, and your emotional freedom. And that's something that's really huge for me. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I know we had met through Podmatch. And what's interesting is, I'm always looking for nuggets of wisdom, always trying to learn something, trying to talk to people outside of my profession and outside of my niche so that I can always glean insights. So tell us more about your background, your story, and we'll get started from there.
Well, it's interesting. I made a few notes for our show. I always like to be prepared for whatever I'm doing. I kind of like create a recipe, like a doctor. And to make a long story short, as a physician, and any physician that's listening, you know what a FemPop is. So 27 years old, I had peripheral vascular disease, atherosclerosis. They did a FemPop on both my legs. A few months later, they wanted to do another FemPop, and they couldn't tell me why it was happening. My bloods were normal, cholesterol, HDL, everything. Cholesterol was 140 total. I mean, it was all my panels were normal, yet I kept having this issue. And so I left AMA, I left the hospital, and I started doing something, and this is going to lead to a point that I'm trying to make here. I started walking a lot because the doctor told me to keep walking because we built collaterals, because the pain, was from the claudication in the legs. Again, I'm 27 years old. I have an old man's disease. And I ended up starting to take a yoga class. And as I started taking the yoga class, I really liked it. Now, this is back in the late 80s, early 90s, right? And by the mid 90s, I was doing a lot of option trading. I'd made quite a bit of money, and I decided to take a couple of years off just to take care of myself because I still had some pain. I still had some claudication, but it was normally after like 5 miles or something. It wasn't just calf pain. I mean, I could tell it was claudication. So I ended up taking this yoga training to heal my body, not to become a teacher, but to heal my body. It was a very intensive 11-week training, and we were doing yoga all day long. Well, within a couple of weeks, my pain went away, and all the pain that had been holding on for 10, 12 years was gone. Well, a week later, I started teaching. A year later, I opened up my first yoga studio. And I say this to make a point about doctors and investing and everything else. I ended up opening another studio and partnering in several others, and then doing business coaching for yoga studios all over the world. And in the time that I did that, I don't know exactly because we didn't track the financials as well as we could have, but we generated somewhere between 40 and $50 million in revenue with a pretty good net on that too. Lowest net about 18, highest about 35. So we were doing pretty good, right? It was the heyday. And then bam, COVID happened. It shut everything down. I had sold my studios and I just had my revenue that was coming in, my revenue share, and it disappeared like overnight. In 72 hours, it was like, oops, the studios are what? Closed. I have no more revenue. Where did my revenue go? So it's a huge lesson in diversity, right? So growing up, my dad owned a bunch of gas stations. He had about 100 gas stations. And when he ended up passing, and then there was more after that, but he taught me something very valuable about that. And this is really great for any physician, anyone listening in real estate, but this happened to be gas stations. So he owned the underlying property, he leased it to the dealer, and he sold him the gas. So then Harvard came in, I forget what year it is, and they did a study on my dad's company and was trying to figure out whether it was a gasoline and oil distribution company or a real estate company. Because, the value of a property, of a gas station on a busy corner is really high, right? So the whole time again, and he owned everything outright. I mean, he was a bootstrapper. And so whenever he opened up a new station, he paid for it, right? He didn't leverage it, he paid for it, right? So it was just this incredible cash flow coming in. So how do you do that? Like with yoga studios, we started doing that same idea with the yoga studios. But again, if there's no money to make the payments, then there's a problem there too, right? Because the yoga studio is closing. So I've learned a lot over the years about investing, about diversification. I've made some money, I've lost some money. You had a previous guest on here recently, which I mentioned to you, Ed Carrion, which is, he doesn't like to call himself a self-made millionaire. He likes to call himself a God-made millionaire because of his beliefs and his relationship to God and all that. And I love that about Ed. He's really great with that. So the idea about story, where do you want to go with this?
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating because we talk about so first thing is we'll talk about because we're talking about failure and hardship, especially the last 2 years, everybody, and
Yep.
how miserable failure can take you to the top. Tell us more about that idea.
Well, I believe that we have failures for a reason. It's not just because we messed up somewhere along the way. That failures are built in. I mean, even Warren Buffett says if he makes one good decision a year, he's happy with that. One good decision a year from perhaps the world's best investor. So how many failures has he had along the way with that? I don't know. I'd have to go back again and look. But when I look at myself, whenever I failed, it's given me, in essence, dissatisfactional motivation. I'm dissatisfied about this particular situation. And what can I do to use it to propel myself forward to gaining those areas that I want? Again, I like the way that you break it down into financial, location, time, and emotion. Financial. How can that failure help me financially if it's a particular financial error, mistake, or failure? How can I propel that to invest better the next time, generate more revenue, diversify a little bit better? Location, where am I living? Am I living in a place that I want to live? Now, in my case, I live in Central Oregon, 3,700 feet up against the Cascades. I love where I live because I have control of my time. So like last night, I ran up to a butte, a remote butte, so I could watch the sunset. So those are the type of things that I want. And emotionally, having that emotional stability. So each one of those failures, if you break it down, and you can break it down in all those different areas, or one that affects all those different areas. So I take a look at even like my legs, my PVD and my FemPops and all that. And I look, well, I can, decide to just sit on the couch and eat potato chips and die at 27, or I can decide to get off my ass and actually do something about it and change it. So that would be an example of dissatisfaction motivation, which then propelled me into a business where we generated multiple 9 figures of income.
Doc to Doc is a personal lending solution designed by doctors for doctors. We understand that doctors' financial situations change faster than an insulin drip in ketoacidosis. And we also understand that doctors are the most reliable borrowers in the world. Through our proprietary algorithm, we're able to provide personal loans at great rates with amazing flexibility because we take into account your schooling, your specialty, and where you are in the medical journey. Doctors come to us after they've matched into residency, and we loan for all sorts of personal reasons, from credit card debt consolidation to family expenses and medical bills. We speak with everyone who applies for a loan and offer fixed interest rates and flexible term options without prepayment penalties. If you're a physician looking for a personal loan, fill out our application form now. It only takes 3 minutes, and we'll get back to you with a decision within 24 hours.
Most stories from rags to riches or success stories, everybody, they 9 times out of 10 that they failed, and we only hear about the 1 time out of 10 that they succeeded.
Yeah.
And the other question is basically why we feed the monkey mind and how to stop it. What do you mean by that?
Well, I'll give you the short version of the story. So I was in India in 2003. I went over there because I wanted to find out a little bit more about yoga and such. And we were staying at the in Agra, where the Taj Mahal is. I think it's called the Agra Palace Hotel. And they have these guys walking around the grounds with these long 15, 20-foot sticks to chase away the monkeys, right? Because the monkeys love to jump up on the balconies and find any open door because they could see that bowl of fruit in there, right? And if they found an open door, they would hop in. Well, if there was somebody in that room in the shower and they come out and find the room full of monkeys, the monkeys are pissed, right? They don't like it. They're snarling, they might bite you, all that other type of stuff. So the lesson is there, very simple. Keep your door closed. And then the monkeys can't get in. They may jump up against the windows, which they will do. So how does that affect the mind? Well, I used to think, because everybody's experienced some form of monkey mind or mind jumping all over the place and all that. I used to think that if I had a bowl of bananas there, I was keeping the monkeys happy, where I really wasn't. I was just bringing them in because they wanted to be fed more, right? So it took a little bit, but I stopped putting those bananas and that fruit out for the monkeys to appease them. And eventually they went away to some other open door, right? So instead of getting into my sliding door of my mind, they have to go to somebody else's sliding door. Maybe eventually they'll learn to close it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So, and then one thing that you talk about a lot is because you've written books, and one thing that was interesting is quantum leaps, and you talk about take one anytime, and go expand upon that concept.
Sure. Well, I think as a physician, you can appreciate this in any physician or anybody listening for that matter. I like to study nature. I like to study how things happen. I take a look at myself. Perfectly healthy one moment, and then the next moment they're cutting me open. Perfectly sick one moment, the next moment you're healthy again. Sometimes without explanation either way. It just happens, right? You take a look at nature. There's an owl in Africa, the northern white owl. It's called a transformer owl. It sits up on, the branch of a tree, and it can make itself look really big to scare somebody off, or it can shrink down really small in height and make itself look like a branch, depending upon what's going on in its world at the time. There's lots of animals that can do that. That's essentially a quantum leap. A quantum leap is essentially a change of state from one state to another. A sea cucumber, some sea cucumbers can go from soft and gushy to rock solid hard in an instant. So these quantum leaps, this so-called quantum leaps, which is really a change of state, happens really quickly. As a physician, healing, they try to instigate some type of healing process, whether it's surgical, whether it's pharmaceutical, whether it's emotional, but to create some type of state, some type of change in state to create health. Well, what can we do in our lives? The same thing. So if you have dissatisfaction or motivation, you can decide in a moment like that you're going to use that for something different and change your mind. You can, a man asking a woman to marry him, at that particular moment, there is an instant change of state. Oh, yes, I want to, that state of shock, emotional, the blushing, whatever it might be. That's a quantum leap. It's a change of state. So I believe those things happen all the time around us. So what can we do to create our own quantum leap? So that's a question for everybody. What can you do to create your own quantum leap?
So can you give us example? I know, for example, because we'll talk about how you do 10K each year, but what does nature, or how does nature teach us to take quantum leaps?
Well, years ago, I like to relate things to experience, right? So up in the mountains here where I live, there's a lake up there that by the end of the summer, by early fall, it's pretty mud. Rest of the year it's either frozen or it's got a couple of feet of water. But standing out in the middle of the lake one day, it was October, and all of a sudden a snowstorm came in, an unexpected snowstorm, instantly started snowing. And if I hadn't gotten out of there, well, it happened anyway, but I had to get out of there because before you knew it, there was 6-8 inches of snow on the ground, right? So there's another example of nature creating a quantum leap, an instant change of state from one state to another state. And I look at it, I went up to the top of a butte yesterday. I mentioned this before. I went up to the top of a butte, and all of a sudden I'm sitting up there, the sun goes down, the temperature drops about 10 or 12 degrees, like that. So nature keeps changing its state constantly.
Yeah. In these days, it's almost, it can go from winter to summer almost overnight. That's heard of. That's can happen these days. So
yeah. And it's going to be nearly 100 degrees here today.
Yeah. Well, one thing I found interesting in your bio was that you talk about each year you do a 10K that starts at 7,700 feet, ends at 9,800 feet, and it fascinates me. What motivates you to do that?
Well, every time I hike up a butte, it's the same thing, because 35 years ago, they were going to amputate my legs, and they told me that I would die within 6 months, 35 years ago, and I'm still here and alive, right? So I walk every day. I keep my body moving, and I can prove to myself from doing that 10K, the Steens Rim Run, comes up the first weekend of August every year. It's like proving to myself that I've overcome this condition, that I'm healthy, that I'm strong, and that if I keep my body in motion like this, it's likely that it's going to stay healthy for a longer period of time.
Yeah, right? I love that. Yeah. Plus at that altitude, the oxygen level is lower, so it conditions your muscles in your body to function under oxygen deprived conditions, so it makes you much stronger.
I mean, I'm at 30, I live at 3,700. It starts at 77, but we still go a few days early just to acclimate because
Yeah.
it is higher. I mean, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I found also interesting was because you talk about yoga, and really, I think yoga has so many benefits, beyond the physical. And what has practicing, teaching yoga taught you about the law, especially law of attraction and the law of Goya?
The law of GOYA. Well, the law of attraction, have you heard of the book, The Secret?
By Rhonda Byrne, correct?
Yeah, Rhonda Byrne. It's a
Yeah.
fairly, it's been, get when it came out now, it's almost 20 years old, right? And it's a book about the law of attraction, and some people think that if they sit on their couch long enough, their Aunt Mabel's going to drop 10 million bucks in their pocket. Probably not going to happen, right? So the law of attraction is really great, but you need the law of Goya to make it work. And the law of Goya is get off your ass, right? You actually got to take action. So I like to describe it as a rice bowl, like a veggie rice bowl. If in my mind, I want to have a veggie rice bowl for dinner, I may be thinking, okay, I'm going to get tofu, broccoli, green beans, garlic, rice, whatever. And so I'm now having this vision of what I want. I can picture it, I can taste it, the whole thing. As an example, then I go to the store, I get the rice, I get the veggies, I get the tofu, I get the soy sauce, whatever ingredients it is. I come home, I put it together, and now it's sitting on my dinner table to eat. To me, that is the law of attraction. We are doing it all the time. And whatever we create in our mind, whether it's getting a rice bowl, whether it's investing in something, whether it's buying a car. I mean, I have cars in my mind that I have in my mind right now. Like I want a new Mercedes van. I have that in my mind and what I want and how it looks and what it's going to be on the inside and what the bench is going to like and the bed is going to look like. So now all I got to do is go out and get it, order it, have it customized for me. And I've done the action to make the law of attraction work.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And one thing that came to mind is, everything, you want something physical, you have to actually put in the work because it's actually, you're just converting energy. So it's like you put in the work and then, that's how money rewards everything. There's no free lunch for anything. So
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating discussion. I really, I love your approach and I love the ideas. And you talk about stories and which we didn't get into, but I know a lot of listeners, they're interested in searching for your book, visiting your website, contacting you, and maybe even working with you. So how can they do that?
I'll briefly mention one thing about stories. We've been telling stories since the beginning of time. We used to go out there and hunt a dinosaur and drag it back and eat it. And we'd tell our family and friends what we did to take down that dinosaur. Second, third grade, we do show and tell. It's our first speaker training event. You don't know it at the time, but you get up and you tell all your friends about this rock you found over the weekend. Right. So we already know how to speak. It's just really making that stronger, building that up, increasing the skills, for a speaker. So I love storytelling. I love helping other people get their stories out. My story is going to affect somebody, your story is going to affect somebody, and vice versa. Maybe your story won't affect some and my story won't affect some, But if we're all out there telling our stories, like even what you're doing here, bringing all your guests in, doing some storytelling, it's a wonderful way. It's kind of the modern way of sitting around the campfire talking about dinosaurs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I partnered with somebody else and we started a small company called Endless Stages. And we really help people speak on any platform, whether it's podcasting. We do a lot with Podmatch and Alex over at Podmatch, whether it's stage, virtual, wherever it is you want to get your story out. So if they were to go to any listener here, if you want to go to michaelbharris.com, michaelbharris.com. That's a B, michaelbharris.com. They can opt in there, and it gives you free resources, absolutely no charge, for various resources, videos, materials on how to be a better speaker, how to overcome stage fright, how to create a signature story, those type of things, just to get your voice out there. Because I think in today's world, the more voices we get out, the better.
Yeah, so wonderfully said. So, Michael, was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I think the audience came away with a lot of wisdom and nuggets. So, thanks so much, and we look forward to hearing more about your future successes.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.
I'm excited that you made it for another episode. You are truly the best. If you've been following the show for a while, you know that my passion is to bring you the education you need to find your path to financial freedom. Please come back week after week for new content, new resources, and great guests. Until then, if you haven't already, please be sure to check out the website, www.drchrislumdphd.com, for more support. I'll see you next week.